Hi everyone, welcome to American Stories. Let's get started. Tom Anderson was a 73-year-old farmer who never imagined his story would reach the desk of Donald Trump himself. His weathered hands had worked the soil of Anderson Valley Farm since he was strong enough to hold a pitchfork, just like his father and grandfather before him. But on that cold October morning, as he hammered the "For Sale" sign into the frozen ground, he had no idea that within 48 hours, an unexpected call from Mar-a-Lago would turn his world upside down. Anderson Valley Farm wasn't just any piece of land in rural Montana. It was a testament to American farming heritage, stretching across 200 acres of fertile soil that had fed the region for 3 generations. Every morning for the past 55 years, Tom would wake up at 3:30 a.m., pull on his worn work boots, and head out to tend to his prized Holstein dairy cows. The sweet smell of hay and the gentle lowing of cattle had been the soundtrack to his life, just as it had been for his father Robert and grandfather William before him. The farm wasn't just about growing crops and raising cattle. It was about preserving a way of life that was becoming increasingly rare in modern America. Tom's grandfather had started with just 40 acres during the Great Depression, armed with nothing but determination and a dream of building something that would last. Through sheer grit and countless hours of backbreaking work, he'd slowly transformed those initial 40 acres into a thriving operation. The old barn, built by William Anderson's own hands in 1937, still stood proud against the Montana sky, its weathered boards telling silent stories of generations of hard work and dedication. When Tom's father Robert took over in the 1950s, he expanded the operation, adding dairy cattle and diversifying the crops. Robert had been a forward-thinking farmer for his time, implementing soil conservation practices that were considered revolutionary back then. He'd taught young Tom that the soil wasn't just dirt. It was a living thing that needed to be nurtured and protected. Those lessons had stuck with Tom throughout his life, shaping his approach to farming and his role in the community. The locals all knew Anderson Valley Farm well. It was more than just a business. It was the backbone of their small community of Pine Creek, population 2,027. During the harsh winter of 2019, when heavy snowfall had cut off road access to the town for nearly a week, Tom had made sure every family in the area had fresh milk and eggs. He'd navigate his old John Deere tractor through the snow-covered roads, delivering supplies to elderly neighbors and those who couldn't make it to town. The local paper had run a story about it, calling him Pine Creek's guardian angel, though Tom had brushed off the attention with his characteristic modesty. Every fall, the farm would transform into a community gathering place. Children from the local elementary school would arrive in yellow buses for their annual field trips, their eyes wide with wonder as Tom taught them about where their food came from. He had a special way with kids, patiently answering their endless questions and showing them how to milk cows by hand, just as his father had taught him. The pumpkin patch became a favorite destination, with Tom never charging families who couldn't afford the modest prices. The look on a child's face when they find the perfect pumpkin, that's worth more than money, he'd always say, his eyes twinkling with joy as he watched another generation discover the magic of farm life. Tom's wife Sarah had passed away 5 years ago, but her touch was still evident throughout the farm. The flower gardens she'd lovingly tended still bloomed every spring, bursting with colorful zinnias and black-eyed Susans. Her handwritten recipes for fresh butter and cheese were still used in the farm's small dairy operation, the pages worn and stained from years of use. Their children had moved away years ago. Their daughter Emily was a teacher in Seattle, and their son Michael worked in technology in Austin. But they'd always return for the harvest, helping their father maintain the family tradition. The annual harvest dinner, a tradition Sarah had started 30 years ago, continued to bring the whole community together each September. The farm store, a modest wooden building near the main road, had become a local institution, Tom sold fresh produce, dairy products, and homemade preserves at prices everyone could afford. The shelves were stocked with jars of honey from his own beehives, fresh eggs from his free-range chickens, and vegetables picked that very morning. During tough times, he'd quietly extend credit to struggling families, often forgetting to collect payment when he knew they couldn't spare the money. The store's bulletin board was covered with thank you notes from community members, each one telling a story of how Anderson Valley Farm had touched their lives. What made Anderson Valley Farm special wasn't just its long history or its role in the community. It was Tom's unwavering commitment to sustainable farming practices. While many larger operations had turned to aggressive chemical use and factory farming methods, Tom had maintained the traditional approach his father had taught him. His cattle were grass-fed, roaming freely across lush pastures. His crops were rotated to preserve soil health, and his produce was grown without harmful pesticides. He'd won numerous awards from the Montana Organic Farmers Association, though he kept the certificates tucked away in a drawer, saying the health of his land was reward enough. But now, as Tom stood in his driveway looking at that for sale sign, it seemed like none of that would matter. The farm that had weathered the Dust Bowl, survived multiple recessions, and adapted to countless changes in the agricultural industry, was about to become just another statistic, another family farm lost to the relentless march of corporate agriculture. What Tom didn't know was that fate had other plans, and help would come from the most unexpected source imaginable. Within 48 hours, a single phone call would not only change his life, but would spark a movement that would help preserve family farms across America. The trouble began when Pine Creek's only local bank, First Heritage Bank, was acquired by Global Finance Corp., a multinational banking conglomerate headquartered in New York City. For over 50 years, First Heritage had understood the rhythms of farming life, working with local farmers through the natural ups and downs of agricultural cycles. Tom had known every bank manager personally. They'd gone to the same church, their kids had attended the same schools, and they understood that farming wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. But Global Finance brought a different approach. The new management team, led by Regional Director Marcus Sterling, saw farming as nothing more than a business proposition. The personal relationships that had sustained the community for generations meant nothing to them. Within months of the takeover, letters started arriving at farms across the county announcing updates to lending policies and reviews of existing loan agreements. Tom remembered the day he received his letter. It was a crisp September morning, and he'd just finished his morning milking routine when he saw the official-looking envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a document filled with corporate jargon about risk assessment protocols and asset liability ratios, but the bottom line was clear. His monthly payments would nearly triple, and the bank wanted additional collateral to secure the existing loan. "They're saying our farm isn't profitable enough by their standards," Tom explained to his neighbor Bill Thompson over coffee at the local diner. Bill, whose family had farmed the neighboring land for 4 generations, shook his head in disbelief. "How can they just change the terms like that? We've never missed a payment in 30 years. The new bank policies seemed designed to push out small farmers. They demanded detailed business plans with profit projections that were impossible for family farms to meet. They required expensive insurance policies that ate into already thin profit margins. Most devastating of all, they refused to consider the historical performance of the farms or their importance to the local community." Tom tried everything he could think of to save the farm. He sold his prized antique tractor collection, pieces of equipment that had been in the family for generations. Each sale felt like losing a piece of family history: the 1952 Farmall that his father had taught him to drive on, the vintage John Deere that had helped them through the drought of '88. One by one, they were loaded onto flatbed trucks and driven away, He worked longer hours, despite his aging body's protests. His daughter Emily noticed the toll it was taking during her monthly video calls. "Dad, you look exhausted," she'd say, worried about the dark circles under his eyes and the new lines in his face. But Tom would just smile and change the subject, not wanting to worry his children with the reality of the situation. Sarah's antique collection, carefully curated over their 45 years of marriage, was the next to go. Each piece had a story. The Victorian tea set they'd found at a farm auction in '73, the hand-carved rocking chair that had been a wedding gift from her grandmother. Tom placed ads in antique magazines and online auction sites. His heart, heavy as collectors, came to claim pieces of his family's history. He even tried reaching out to the bank directly, scheduling meetings with the new managers to explain the farm's situation. He brought detailed records showing the farm's consistent profitability, letters from community members attesting to its importance, and proposals for how he could gradually adjust to new payment terms. But the bank executives seemed more interested in their smartphones than his presentation. "Mr. Anderson," Marcus Sterling had said during their last meeting, barely looking up from his device, "farming is changing. Small operations like yours just aren't viable in today's economy. Have you considered selling to one of the larger agricultural corporations? They're always looking to expand their operations." The suggestion felt like a slap in the face. Tom had watched as corporate farms bought up neighboring properties, replacing diverse family farms with vast monoculture operations. The Wilsons' organic dairy farm had become a massive cornfield. The Martinez family's vegetable operation was now part of a massive soybean plantation. Each sale meant fewer families in the community, fewer kids in the local schools, and another piece of farming heritage lost forever. The pressure wasn't just financial. The stress began affecting every aspect of Tom's life. He started skipping the morning coffee gatherings at Betty's diner, where local farmers had met for decades to share news and support each other. He stopped attending church socials, unable to face the pitying looks from neighbors who knew about his situation. Even his beloved daily routine of teaching local kids about farming became difficult, as he wondered how many more school tours he'd be able to host. The final straw came when he received notice that the bank was initiating foreclosure proceedings. The letter arrived on a Friday afternoon, the official language cold and impersonal. Due to failure to meet updated lending requirements, Global Finance Corp hereby provides notice of intent to foreclose. Tom sat at his kitchen table, the same table where 3 generations of Andersons had shared meals and made plans for the farm's future, and felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. That night, as he sat alone in the darkening kitchen, Tom made the hardest decision of his life. The next morning he would put up the "for sale" sign. The thought of it made his hands shake as he gripped his coffee mug, but he saw no other choice. How could he tell his children that he would be the one to lose the farm that their grandfather had built from nothing? How could he face the community that had relied on Anderson Valley Farm for so long? What Tom didn't know was that his story was about to reach someone who saw more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. Someone who understood that America's family farms were worth fighting for. But first, things would have to get worse before they got better. The impact of Anderson Valley Farm's impending sale rippled through Pine Creek like a stone dropped in still water. The community had always taken the farm's presence for granted. It was like the mountains on the horizon, or the changing of seasons, something that had always been there and always would be. But now, as word spread about Tom's situation, people began to realize just how much the farm meant to their way of life. The first signs of change appeared at Betty's diner, where Tom's usual corner booth sat empty during the morning coffee hours. Betty Martinez, who had run the diner for 30 years, felt the absence keenly. Tom had been supplying her restaurant with fresh produce and dairy products since she'd opened, and his rates had never changed, even when market prices soared. Tom's the reason I could keep my prices affordable for working families, she explained to customers who noticed the market price notation appearing next to more menu items. At Pine Creek Elementary, Principal Sarah Jenkins had to announce that the annual farm field trips would be cancelled. For 25 years, every third-grade class had visited Anderson Valley Farm to learn about agriculture. Tom had never charged for these educational visits, saying that teaching kids about farming was an investment in the future. The disappointed faces of the children hit Tom hard when he saw them around town. "Mr. Anderson, will we still get to pick pumpkins this year?" Little Amy Chen had asked him at the grocery store, her eyes wide with hope. Tom had to turn away, unable to answer. The local food bank felt the impact particularly hard. Tom had been their largest regular donor, providing fresh produce and dairy products year-round. Margaret Wilson, the food bank's director, started seeing their supplies dwindle. "Tom never made a big show of his donations," she explained to the local newspaper. "He'd just show up every Monday morning with his truck full of fresh food. Sometimes I'd try to give him a receipt for tax purposes, but he'd always say, 'Just make sure it gets to people who need it.'" The farm's importance to the community went beyond food. When Pine Creek High School needed to raise money for new band uniforms, Tom had offered up his barn for a fundraising dance. When the volunteer fire department needed practice with their new equipment, he'd let them use his irrigation pond. During the county fair, Anderson Valley Farm's booth had always been the gathering place, where old friends reconnected and newcomers were welcomed to the community. The farm store became a place of pilgrimage as news of the impending sale spread. Longtime customers came to stock up on their favorite products. Mrs. Johnson bought extra jars of Tom's famous honey. The Ramirez family filled their freezer with the farm's grass-fed beef, and old Mr. Peterson bought several wheels of the raw milk cheese that helped with his arthritis. But they weren't just buying products. They were collecting memories. The store's bulletin board told the story of the farm's impact through yellowed thank you notes and faded photographs. There was a picture from 1985 of Tom teaching a young Kevin Martinez how to milk a cow. Kevin was now a veterinarian in town. A letter from 1993 thanked Tom for extending credit during the writer's unemployment, allowing their family to eat fresh, healthy food during hard times. A recent note from the high school agriculture club expressed gratitude for Tom's mentorship of aspiring young farmers. Tom's sustainable farming practices had influenced others in the region. He'd been one of the first in the county to adopt organic methods, proving that traditional family farms could thrive without relying on harmful chemicals. Other farmers had followed his example, creating a network of sustainable farms that supplied fresh, healthy food to communities throughout Montana. "Tom showed us there was another way," explained Frank Cooper, who ran a small organic farm in the next county. "He proved that you could farm in harmony with nature and still make a living." The farm's Heritage Seed program was another community treasure at risk. Over the years, Tom had maintained a collection of heirloom vegetable varieties, passed down through generations of Montana farmers. He shared these seeds freely with other farmers and gardeners, helping preserve agricultural biodiversity. The thought of this living library being lost hit many local gardeners hard. "These aren't just seeds," explained Mary Running Bear, whose family had traded traditional Native American crop varieties with the Andersons for generations. "They're part of our history, our culture." Local businesses felt the ripple effects too. The hardware store where Tom bought his supplies, the feed store that supplied his animal feed, the mechanics who maintained his equipment all faced the prospect of losing a reliable customer. But more than that, they were losing a friend who had helped them through their own tough times. Jim Cooper at the feed store remembered how Tom had paid in advance for 6 months of supplies when Jim's wife was battling cancer, helping keep the business afloat during that difficult period. Even The local real estate agent, tasked with listing the farm, struggled with the assignment. "This isn't just about selling property," Lisa Thompson explained, fighting back tears. "This is about selling a piece of our community's soul." She had grown up visiting the farm, and her own children had learned to appreciate fresh food through Tom's patient teachings. The thought of writing up a listing that would attract corporate buyers made her physically ill. As word of the sale spread beyond Pine Creek, former residents began calling and emailing with their own Anderson Valley farm memories. A retired teacher wrote about how Tom's farm visits had inspired several of her students to pursue agricultural careers. A businessman in Seattle recalled how working summers at the farm had taught him the value of hard work. A chef in Chicago credited his passion for fresh, local ingredients to childhood visits to the farm store. But what hit Tom hardest were the quiet moments. The elderly neighbors who stopped by just to sit on his porch. The young parents who wanted their children to see the farm one last time. The long-time customers who shared stories of how the farm had touched their lives. Each visitor was a reminder of what was being lost. Not just a business, but a way of life that had sustained a community for generations. The day Tom put up the "for sale" sign was the hardest of his life. The morning had started like any other. He'd risen before dawn, done his chores, and tended to the animals. But as he drove the metal stake into the frozen ground, each hammer blow felt like a nail in his own heart. The bright red letters seemed to mock everything his family had built. "For sale, Anderson Valley Farm, Esther, 1937. Below the main sign, Tom had added a smaller note in his neat handwriting. "Thank you for 87 years of memories." He stood there for a long moment, his breath visible in the cold Montana air, wondering how many people would understand what those words really meant. They meant 87 years of dawn milkings, of spring plantings and fall harvests, of Christmas trees sold and pumpkins given away. They meant 3 generations of Andersons working the same soil, feeding the same community, living the same dream. The news spread quickly through social media. Jenny Chen, whose daughter had asked about the pumpkins, took a photo of the sign and posted it on Facebook with a heartfelt message. "Today marks the end of an era in Pine Creek. Anderson Valley Farm, which has fed our community for 87 years, is being forced to close. Mr. Anderson taught my daughter where food comes from, just like he taught me when I was her age. This isn't just about losing a farm, it's about losing part of who we are." The post struck a chord far beyond Pine Creek. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times, with people from across the country adding their own comments and memories. A reporter from the Montana Daily Chronicle called, wanting to do a feature story. "This is happening all across America," she explained to Tom. "Family farms are disappearing, and with them, we're losing something precious." The reporter, Sarah Martinez, spent a full day at the farm, following Tom through his routine. She watched as he handled his tasks with the quiet efficiency that comes from decades of experience. She noticed how he knew each cow by name, how he could tell just by looking at his fields what they needed, how the farm operated like a living thing with Tom as its caretaker. Her article, titled "The Last Days of Anderson Valley Farm," painted a vivid picture of what was being lost. She described Tom's weathered hands checking soil quality, his gentle way with animals, and the profound sadness in his eyes when he talked about the future. The article went viral online, shared by countless readers who saw in Tom's story a reflection of changes happening in their own communities. Local television stations picked up the story next. The cameras captured Tom walking through his fields, explaining how his grandfather had taught him to listen to the land. They filmed the empty farm store, its shelves growing bare as Tom sold off the last of his inventory. Most powerfully, they recorded the steady stream of community members coming to say goodbye, each one sharing what the farm had meant to them. A documentary filmmaker from PBS reached out, wanting to include Tom's story in a series about the disappearance of family farms. "Your situation perfectly illustrates what's happening across rural America," she explained. "Small farms are being squeezed out by big corporations and unsympathetic banks, and we're losing more than just farms. We're losing our connection to the land." The media attention brought a flood of support from unexpected places. Veterans groups spoke about how Tom had hired returning servicemen over the years, giving them a chance to heal through working the land. Environmental organizations praised his sustainable farming practices. Food security advocates pointed to Anderson Valley Farm as a model of how local farms could feed communities. But it was a local high school student's YouTube video that really captured the human cost of losing the farm. 17-year-old Miguel Ramirez had been documenting life in Pine Creek for his senior project. His video showed Tom teaching children about farming, helping neighbors during hard times, and quietly supporting the community in countless ways. The video ended with a simple question: when we lose our family farms, what else do we lose? The video went viral, catching the attention of national news networks. Suddenly, Anderson Valley Farm became a symbol of a larger story: the struggle of American family farms to survive in an increasingly corporate agricultural landscape. News trucks began appearing in Tom's driveway, their satellite dishes broadcasting his story across the nation. Through it all, Tom maintained his dignity and humility. When reporters asked about the bank's actions, he refused to criticize them directly. "They're just doing what they think is right for their business," he'd say. "I just wish they could understand that farming isn't just a business. It's a way of life." His quiet strength in the face of adversity only made his story more compelling. The attention was overwhelming at times. Tom wasn't used to being in the spotlight. He'd always preferred to let his work speak for him. But he understood that his story had become something larger than himself. It had become a story about the value of family farms, about the importance of community, about what we stand to lose when we prioritize profits over people. As the media coverage grew, so did the public outrage. Letters to the editor filled local newspapers. Politicians began making statements about the need to protect family farms. Online petitions circulated, calling for changes to banking regulations. But through it all, the bank remained unmoved. To them, Anderson Valley Farm was just another underperforming asset on their balance sheet. What no one knew was that among the millions of people following Tom's story, one viewer in particular was paying close attention. From his office in Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump had seen the coverage and recognized something in Tom's story that resonated with his own views about American values and the importance of preserving traditional ways of life. But before he would intervene, events would take one more dramatic turn. The morning after Miguel's video went viral, Tom woke up to find his email inbox flooded with messages from across the country. People were offering support, sharing similar stories, and asking how they could help. But one email in particular caught his attention. It was from Jennifer Parker, a producer at Fox News. "Your story has touched millions of Americans," she wrote. "We'd like to feature you on our evening program. America needs to hear from farmers like you." Tom had never sought the spotlight, but he understood that his situation had become about something bigger than himself. After consulting with his children over the phone, he agreed to the interview. The Fox News segment aired during prime time. The host introduced Tom's story with powerful imagery. Sweeping drone shots of Anderson Valley Farm at sunrise, historic photos of Tom's grandfather breaking ground in 1937, and recent footage of Tom teaching local children about farming. But it was Tom's quiet dignity during the live interview that really captured viewers' hearts. My grandfather started this farm during the Great Depression, Tom explained, his voice steady despite his emotion. He used to say that even in the hardest times, people need to eat and somebody needs to feed them. That's what we've tried to do for 87 years, not just grow food, but take care of our community. When asked about the bank's actions, Tom remained gracious. I don't blame them for looking at their bottom line, he said, but there are some things you can't measure in dollars and cents. How do you put a price on teaching a child where their food comes from? How do you calculate the value of helping your neighbors through hard times? The segment went on to explain how global finances policies were affecting not just Anderson Valley Farm, but family farms across America. They showed statistics about the decline of family farming, interviews with agricultural experts, and testimonials from other farmers facing similar situations. But they kept coming back to Tom's story as a powerful example of what was at stake. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Check Save Anderson Farm was trending on social media. Conservative commentators picked up the story, framing it as an example of corporate overreach, threatening traditional American values. Liberal voices joined in, highlighting the environmental and food security aspects of local farming. A GoFundMe page, started by Miguel Ramirez's mother, raised over $100,000 in just 24 hours. While touching, it wasn't nearly enough to save the farm from global finance's demands, but it showed how many people cared about Tom's situation and what his farm represented. Agricultural organizations began reaching out. The American Farm Bureau Federation contacted their legal team to review Tom's case. The National Farmers Union offered to mediate with the bank. State agricultural officials started looking into whether global finance's lending practices violated any regulations protecting family farms. Local businesses stepped up too. Betty's Diner started a Save Our Farm fundraising breakfast. The High School Agriculture Club organized a letter-writing campaign to state representatives. Even competing farms in neighboring counties offered to share equipment and labor if it would help Tom keep his land. The story took another turn when a group of agricultural history professors from Montana State University visited the farm. They discovered that Anderson Valley Farm was eligible for designation as a historic agricultural site due to its role in developing sustainable farming practices in the region. While this designation wouldn't prevent the sale, it added another layer of complexity to the bank's plans. Then came the veterans groups. Tom had quietly hired returning veterans over the years, giving them a chance to heal through working the land. Now they rallied to his cause. A group of veteran-owned businesses started a separate fundraising campaign. Their involvement brought additional media attention and added a powerful patriotic dimension to the story. Environmental organizations joined the chorus, highlighting how Tom's sustainable farming practices had created a model for ecological agriculture. They produced studies showing how family farms like Anderson Valley helped maintain biodiversity and protect soil health. Climate scientists pointed to Tom's methods as an example of how traditional farming could help fight climate change. But perhaps the most unexpected support came from Silicon Valley. A tech entrepreneur who had grown up on a family farm saw Miguel's video and recognized the potential for using Tom's story to launch a larger conversation about agriculture and technology. He started working on a platform to connect family farms directly with consumers, using Anderson Valley Farm as his pilot case. Through it all, Tom kept working his normal schedule. He still rose before dawn, still tended his animals, still worked with a quiet determination that inspired everyone around him. But now there was hope in his eyes again, not just for his own farm, but for what his story might mean for family. Farms across America, the media coverage continued to build. Each day brought new interviews, new supporters, new ideas for saving the farm. The story had struck a chord with Americans of all backgrounds, becoming a symbol of the struggle between traditional values and corporate pressure, between community needs and profit margins. What no one knew was that among all these viewers, one particular person was watching events unfold with great interest. In his private office at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump had seen the Fox News segment and recognized something in Tom's story that resonated deeply with his own views about American values and the importance of preserving traditional ways of life. As Tom went to bed that night, exhausted but hopeful, he had no idea that the next morning would bring a phone call that would change everything. The movement to save Anderson Valley Farm was about to get its most powerful supporter yet. The morning started like any other on Anderson Valley Farm. Tom was in the barn finishing up the morning milking when his landline phone rang. His daughter, Emily, had been begging him to get a cell phone for years, but he'd always said the old wall-mounted phone worked just fine. Besides, it had been good enough for his father and grandfather. "Mr. Anderson?" a professional female voice said when he answered. "Please hold for Donald Trump." Tom almost dropped the receiver, certain he had misheard, but before he could respond, another voice came on the line, one of the most recognizable voices in America. "Tom, this is Donald Trump. I saw your story on Fox News last night, and let me tell you, what's happening to your farm is a disgrace, a total disgrace. I've been watching what these big banks are doing to our farmers, and I don't like it, not one bit." Trump's voice was direct, passionate, and surprisingly personal. For the next 20 minutes, Tom found himself having a conversation he never could have imagined. Trump asked detailed questions about the farm's history, about the community it served, and about the bank's actions. He was particularly interested in how global finance had changed the loan terms after acquiring the local bank. "You know, Tom, I've dealt with these big banks my whole life," Trump said. "They think they can push around hard-working Americans like you, but they've never met me. Give me 48 hours. That's all I need. We're going to save your farm, and we're going to save a lot of other farms too. Nobody does this to our farmers, nobody." After hanging up, Tom stood in his kitchen, hands trembling as he tried to process what had just happened. "Sarah!" he called out to his wife's photo on the wall, wishing she was there to share this moment. "You won't believe who just called." Within hours, things started happening. A team of lawyers from New York arrived at the farm in sleek black SUVs. They were Trump's personal legal team, and they immediately began reviewing all of Tom's paperwork with global finance. The lead attorney, James Richardson, was particularly interested in the original loan terms from First Heritage Bank. "Mr. Anderson," Richardson said, spreading documents across Tom's kitchen table, "these unilateral changes to your loan terms after the bank acquisition, they're not as legally sound as global finance thinks. Mr. Trump has asked us to explore every avenue to challenge this." Meanwhile, Trump himself was making moves. He posted on Truth Social, "Just spoke with Tom Anderson, great American farmer being crushed by big banks. Anderson Valley Farm has fed its community for 87 years. Not on my watch. Meeting with bank executives today. America first means protecting our farmers." The post went viral instantly. Save Anderson Farm, which had been trending before, now exploded across social media. Trump supporters began organizing rallies in support of family farms. Conservative media outlets picked up the story with renewed vigor, framing it as a battle between American values and corporate greed. By early afternoon, Trump's team had arranged a video call between Tom and several prominent senators who were interested in using his case to push for new legislation protecting family farms. "Your story, Mr. Anderson," one senator explained, "could be the catalyst we need for real change in agricultural banking regulations." But Trump wasn't just working the political angles. He understood business, and he knew how to apply pressure where it would be most effective. His office contacted Global Finance's major shareholders, pointing out how the bank's actions were creating a public relations nightmare. He reached out to other business leaders, asking them to publicly support American family farms. The president of Global Finance, Richard Sterling, was in the middle of a board meeting when he received word that Donald Trump wanted to meet with him immediately. Within hours, Sterling found himself sitting across from Trump at Mar-a-Lago, trying to explain his bank's policies to a man who had built his career on making deals. "Listen, Richard," Trump said, leaning forward in his chair. "I've been in business my whole life. I understand profits, but what your bank is doing, it's not just bad business, it's un-American. These farms are the backbone of our country. Fix this, or I promise you, you won't like what happens next." By evening, Global Finance was already drafting a press release. They announced a new American Family Farm initiative, promising to review and adjust their agricultural lending policies. Tom's loan would be reinstated under its original terms, and similar considerations would be extended to other family farms in their portfolio. But Trump wasn't finished. He saw in Tom's story an opportunity to address a larger issue. His team began drafting proposals for new regulations to protect family farms from predatory lending practices. He called it the American Farm Protection Act, and it would make it much harder for banks to change loan terms on agricultural properties with multi-generational histories. "You know, Tom," Trump said in a follow-up call that evening, "what happened to you? It's happening all over the country, but not anymore. We're going to protect our farmers, all of them. This is about more than just your farm. This is about saving a way of life." The story was becoming bigger than anyone had anticipated. It wasn't just about saving one farm anymore. It was about preserving a crucial part of American heritage. Trump had recognized this and was determined to use his influence to make lasting change. The next morning, Pine Creek woke up to a scene that seemed almost surreal. Black SUVs lined the gravel driveway of Anderson Valley Farm, their government. Plates glinting in the early morning sun. Men in dark suits with earpieces stood at strategic points around the property, while a small army of lawyers and officials bustled about with purposeful energy. Inside the farmhouse kitchen, Tom sat at his familiar old table, now surrounded by legal experts and government officials. The same table where his family had shared countless meals, where his children had done their homework, and where he'd spent sleepless nights worrying about the farm's future, was now the command center for an operation he could hardly believe was real. Mr. Anderson, one of Trump's lawyers, explained, spreading out a new set of documents. "These papers will not only protect your farm, but will serve as a template for protecting family farms across America." The documents outlined a comprehensive plan that went far beyond just saving Anderson Valley Farm. It was a blueprint for preserving agricultural heritage nationwide. Trump had been busy through the night, making calls and pulling strings that only someone with his connections could manage. He'd spoken with bank executives, regulatory officials, and political leaders. By morning, he had assembled a coalition of supporters determined to turn Tom's crisis into a catalyst for change. The first concrete result came at 9 a.m. when Global Finance's board of directors held an emergency meeting. Under intense pressure from shareholders and facing a public relations nightmare, they voted unanimously to create a new Heritage Farm Protection Program. The program would identify and protect historically significant family farms, offering them specialized lending terms that recognize their unique value to their communities. But Trump wasn't satisfied with just one bank's change of heart. His team had drafted executive orders that would require all federally insured banks to create similar programs. "We're going to make it impossible for banks to destroy family farms," he explained in a call to Tom. "These farms aren't just businesses. They're part of America's soul." By midday, a parade of news trucks had begun arriving at Anderson Valley Farm. Word had leaked about Trump's involvement, and media outlets from across the country wanted to cover the story. Tom, still modest, despite all the attention, continued with his daily chores as cameras rolled. The image of him milking his cows while Secret Service agents stood guard became an instant symbol of the intersection of power and rural America. The transformation of Tom's situation had broader implications than anyone had initially realized. Other farmers facing similar pressures began receiving calls from their banks, suddenly eager to review their situations. The ripple effect of Trump's intervention was spreading across rural America, giving hope to countless family farms that had been facing uncertain futures. Local reaction in Pine Creek was emotional. Betty's Diner became a gathering point for community members watching the events unfold on the television mounted above the counter. When the news showed Trump's social media posts about saving the farm, spontaneous cheers erupted. Betty herself had to wipe away tears as she served coffee to the morning crowd. By early afternoon, Tom's children had arrived home. Emily flew in from Seattle and Michael drove up from Austin. They hadn't seen their father's signature smile in months, but now it was back as he showed them the new documents securing their family's legacy. "Your mother would be so proud," he told them, his voice thick with emotion. "The farm will be here for your children now, just like it was here for you." The local high school cancelled classes for the day when Trump announced he would be visiting the farm personally. Students lined the roads with handmade signs supporting Anderson Valley Farm. Miguel Ramirez, whose video had helped bring national attention to the story, was invited to document the historic visit for the school paper. Trump's arrival at the farm was characteristically dramatic. His helicopter landed in the south pasture, kicking up swirls of autumn leaves as it descended. He emerged wearing a custom-made Anderson Valley farm cap, which would later become a sought-after item among his supporters. The sight of Trump walking the fields with Tom, listening intently as the farmer explained his organic farming methods, would become one of the most memorable images of the year. "This is what America is all about," Trump declared, standing in front of the historic barn. "Family farms like Anderson Valley are the backbone of our nation. We're not just saving a farm today, we're saving a way of life." His words, broadcast live across the country, resonated with millions who saw in Tom's story a reflection of their own struggles against corporate power. The day's events concluded with a community celebration in the farm's main barn. Local families brought dishes to share, creating an impromptu feast that showcased the best of rural American hospitality. Trump stayed longer than planned, clearly enjoying the authentic atmosphere and home-cooked food. He even tried his hand at milking one of Tom's cows, creating a moment of levity that would be shared millions of times on social media. The effects of Trump's intervention at Anderson Valley Farm rippled across rural America like waves across a wheat field. In the days following his visit, a transformation began that would change the landscape of American farming forever. The story had touched a nerve in the national consciousness, reminding people of the essential value of family. Farms in American life. Global Finance's new Heritage Farm Protection Program became a model for other financial institutions. Within weeks, major banks across the country were announcing similar initiatives. The programs identified historically significant family farms and offered them specialized lending terms that recognized their unique value to their communities. What had started as one farm's crisis had evolved into a nationwide movement to protect agricultural heritage. Tom found himself at the center of a revolution in agricultural policy. His kitchen table, still covered with legal documents and policy papers, had become an unlikely headquarters for a movement. Farmers from across the country began reaching out sharing their stories and seeking guidance. Each morning brought new emails, letters, and phone calls from families facing similar struggles. "You've got to hear these stories, Emily," Tom would tell his daughter during their nightly calls. "There's a family in Iowa who's had their farm since 1890, another in Kansas that's been teaching local schools about agriculture for 4 generations. These aren't just businesses, they're living history." Emily had taken a leave of absence from her teaching job to help her father manage the overwhelming response. The legislation inspired by Anderson Valley Farm, now formally called the American Family Farm Protection Act, moved through Congress with unprecedented bipartisan support. The act included provisions that made it difficult for banks to change loan terms on multi-generational farms, required consideration of community impact in agricultural lending decisions, and established a national registry of historic family farms. Trump continued to champion the cause, making farm preservation a key talking point in his speeches. "Look at what happened at Anderson Valley Farm," he would say. "That's the America we need to protect. These farmers aren't just growing food, they're preserving our values, our traditions, our way of life." His supporters embraced the message, and "Save Our Farms" became a rallying cry at his rallies. The academic world took notice too. Universities began studying the Anderson Valley case as an example of how public attention and political will could protect traditional agriculture. Agricultural programs started incorporating courses on sustainable family farming, using Tom's methods as a model. Several books were written about the movement, with titles like The Anderson Effect, How One Farm Changed America, and Saving Our Agricultural Heritage. Back in Pine Creek, the changes were both subtle and profound. The "For Sale" sign that had sparked the whole movement now hung in the farm's museum corner, alongside news clippings and photos documenting the historic events. Tour buses regularly pulled up to the farm, bringing visitors eager to see the place where a revolution in agricultural policy had begun. Tom, true to his nature, remained humble despite the attention. He continued his daily routines, still rising before dawn to milk the cows. But now he had help. Young apprentices eager to learn traditional farming methods, veterans finding healing through agricultural work, and students doing research on sustainable farming practices. The farm had become a living classroom. The farm store underwent a renovation, expanded to accommodate the increased interest. But Tom insisted on keeping prices affordable for local families. "We're still here to feed our community," he would say. "That hasn't changed." The store became a model for other farms, showing how traditional agriculture could adapt to modern times without losing its soul. Global Finance's local branch underwent its own transformation. The bank managers who had once spoken only of spreadsheets and profit margins now took pride in their role supporting local agriculture. They created a special display in their lobby showcasing the history of farming in the region. With Anderson Valley Farm featured prominently, the impact on Pine Creek's economy was significant. Other family farms in the region, protected by the new legislation, began to thrive. Young people who had left for cities started returning, drawn by the opportunity to continue their family farming traditions. The local agricultural supply stores, equipment repair shops, and other farm-related businesses saw renewed growth. Trump's legal team didn't stop with just saving farms. They began working on broader rural development initiatives, using Anderson Valley Farm as a model. The programs included support for farmers' markets, agricultural education, and infrastructure improvements in farming communities. What had started as one farm's crisis had evolved into a comprehensive plan for rural revival. The most meaningful change, however, was in the way people viewed family farms. They were no longer seen as just businesses that needed to prove their profit margins. They were recognized as essential parts of America's cultural fabric, worth preserving for reasons that went beyond mere economics. The Anderson Valley story had helped people understand that some things couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. 1 year after Trump's historic visit to Anderson Valley Farm, the transformation was complete. The farm hadn't just survived, it had become the centerpiece of a national movement to preserve America's agricultural heritage. The changes were visible everywhere, from the newly restored barn to the expanded educational programs that brought visitors from across the country. The farm's dairy operation had grown, but not in the way corporate agriculture would have envisioned. Instead of massive industrial facilities, Tom had established a network of small, family-run dairy farms in the region. They shared resources, knowledge, and marketing under the Anderson Valley brand, proving that traditional farming methods could be both profitable and sustainable. "It's like my grandfather always said," Tom explained to a group of agricultural students visiting from Montana State University. "Farming isn't just about growing crops, it's about growing community." The students were part of a new program, inspired by the Anderson Valley story, studying how traditional farming methods could be adapted for the modern era while preserving their essential character. The farm's apprenticeship program had become particularly successful. Young people from across the country applied to learn Tom's methods of sustainable agriculture. Many were children of farmers who had lost their land to corporate consolidation, eager to reclaim their agricultural heritage. Others were urban professionals seeking a more meaningful connection to the land. Veterans continued to find healing at Anderson Valley Farm. The program that had started informally with Tom hiring returning servicemen had evolved into a structured rehabilitation program. "There's something about working the land," explained James Martinez, a former Marine who now managed the farm's vegetable gardens. "It helps you find your peace again." The farm store had become a model for agricultural direct marketing. While maintaining its traditional character, it now included a small cafe where visitors could taste farm-fresh products prepared by local cooks. Betty Martinez from the diner had helped set it up, ensuring that the menu reflected the community's culinary heritage. The store's success had inspired other farms to develop similar operations. Trump's influence continued to be felt. He had made Anderson Valley Farm a symbol of his commitment to rural America, often citing it in speeches about preserving traditional values. What happened at Anderson Valley Farm wasn't just about saving one farm, he would say. It was about saving a way of life that makes America great. The legislation inspired by the farm's story had far-reaching effects. The American Family Farm Protection Act had been expanded to include provisions for agricultural education, support for young farmers, and protection of traditional farming methods. Banks across the country had revised their agricultural lending practices, recognizing the unique value of family farms. Global Finance's Heritage Farm Protection Program had identified and protected over 1,000 historically significant farms. Nationwide, the program's success had led to the creation of a National Registry of Historic Farms, which provided additional protections and resources for preserving agricultural heritage. Tom's children had become more involved in the farm's operations. Emily had taken a leave of absence from teaching to develop educational programs, while Michael used his technology background to create systems for managing the farm's expanding operations while maintaining its traditional character. The farm's impact on Pine Creek had been transformative. The town had become a destination for agricultural tourism, with visitors coming to learn about traditional farming methods and experience rural life. Local businesses had flourished, and young families had moved to the area, drawn by the renewed vitality of the farming community. The high school's agricultural program, once at risk of being cut, was now one of the most successful in the state. Students learned both traditional farming methods and modern sustainable agriculture techniques, Many graduates went on to agricultural colleges or returned to work on family farms, armed with both practical skills and a deep appreciation for farming heritage. Miguel Ramirez, whose video had helped bring national attention to the farm's story, had gone on to study agricultural journalism at college. His documentary about the farm's transformation had won several awards and inspired similar projects across the country. The Anderson Valley story showed me that one person's truth, well told, can change the world, he said. The farm's seed preservation program had expanded into a regional seed bank, protecting hundreds of heirloom varieties. Other farms had joined the effort, creating a network of seed savers dedicated to preserving agricultural biodiversity. The program had attracted attention from international agricultural organizations studying sustainable farming methods. Perhaps most importantly, the farm had maintained its connection to the local community. Despite its national prominence, Anderson Valley Farm remained true to its roots as a source of fresh, affordable food for local families. Tom still insisted on keeping prices accessible and continuing programs like the free pumpkins for children. During harvest season, 2 years after Trump's intervention, Anderson Valley Farm had become more than just a successful family farm. It had evolved into a national symbol of agricultural preservation and rural revival. The transformation went far beyond the original goal of saving one farm. It had sparked a movement that was changing the face of American agriculture. The farm's influence could be seen in new legislation being passed across the country. State after state adopted versions of the Family Farm Protection Act, each adding their own provisions to protect local agricultural heritage. These laws created frameworks for identifying and preserving historically significant farms, ensuring they wouldn't face the same challenges that had nearly ended Anderson Valley Farm. Tom found himself increasingly in demand as a speaker at agricultural conferences and policy meetings. Though he remained humble, his practical wisdom and decades of experience carried weight with both farmers and policymakers. "Farming isn't something you can learn from a book," he would often say. "It's something that gets passed down, generation to generation, like a family recipe." The Anderson Valley Farm model had become a template for agricultural education nationwide. Universities and agricultural schools sent students for internships, learning not just farming techniques, but the broader philosophy of community-based agriculture. The farm had partnered with several land-grant universities to develop curriculum combining traditional farming wisdom with modern sustainable practices. Trump continued to cite Anderson Valley Farm in his speeches about rural America. He had made the farm a cornerstone of his agricultural policy, often referring to the Anderson Valley Way when discussing his vision for American farming. His team maintained regular contact with Tom, consulting him on agricultural issues and using the farm's success to promote similar initiatives nationwide. The farm's seed bank had grown into one of the largest collections of heritage crop varieties in the country. Farmers from across America sent their heirloom seeds to be preserved, along with the stories and traditions associated with them. The collection became a living library of agricultural biodiversity, protecting not just seeds, but the cultural knowledge that went with them. International attention began to focus on the Anderson Valley story. Agricultural delegations from Europe, Asia, and South America visited the farm, studying how traditional farming methods could be preserved in the modern era. The farm's approach to combining heritage practices with sustainable innovation became a model for agricultural preservation worldwide. The impact on the local economy continued to grow. Pine Creek had become a destination for agricultural tourism, with visitors coming to experience life on a traditional American farm. New businesses had opened to serve the increased traffic: bed and breakfasts, restaurants featuring local produce, and shops selling locally made crafts and food products. The farm's dairy operation had evolved into a cooperative network of small producers, all following Tom's methods and standards. The Anderson Valley brand had become synonymous with quality and sustainability, commanding premium prices while remaining accessible to local families. The success proved that traditional farming could be economically viable without sacrificing its values. Educational programs at the farm had expanded beyond agriculture. Local schools used the farm for science classes, history lessons, and environmental education. The farm had become a living classroom where students could learn about everything from soil chemistry to rural economics, all while experiencing the rhythms of farm life firsthand. The Veterans Program had grown into a formal partnership with the VA, offering structured rehabilitation through agricultural work. The program's success had led to similar initiatives at farms across the country, creating new opportunities for veterans to find healing and purpose through farming. Local food security had improved dramatically. The network of family farms, inspired by Anderson Valley's success, ensured a stable supply of fresh, locally grown food. The community food bank, once dependent on donations, now had reliable partnerships with local farms, ensuring year-round access to fresh produce for families in need. Tom's children had fully embraced their roles in the farm's future. Emily had developed an educational curriculum that was being adopted by farms and schools nationwide. Michael had created a technology platform that helped small farms manage their operations while maintaining traditional practices. Together, they were ensuring that Anderson Valley Farm would continue to innovate while preserving its heritage. The farm's impact on banking practices continued to evolve. Global Finance's Heritage Farm Protection Program had been so successful that it became industry standard. Banks across the country had developed specialized agricultural lending programs that considered a farm's historical and community value alongside traditional financial metrics. Research at Anderson Valley Farm had demonstrated the environmental benefits of traditional farming methods. Studies showed improved soil health, increased biodiversity, and better water conservation compared to industrial farming methods. The findings helped support the argument for preserving family farms as part of environmental conservation efforts. 3 years after the crisis that nearly ended Anderson Valley Farm, the impact of its preservation continued to ripple across America. What had started as one farmer's struggle against corporate banking had evolved into a nationwide movement, transforming not just agriculture, but the very fabric of rural American life. The most visible symbol of this transformation was the Anderson Valley Farm Institute, established in the converted hay barn that had once nearly been sold for scrap. The institute had become a premier center for agricultural education, combining practical farming knowledge with academic research. Its mission, as Tom often explained, was to preserve not just farming techniques, but the wisdom behind them. The Institute's programs ranged from weekend workshops for hobby gardeners to year-long apprenticeships for aspiring farmers. Veterans continued to find healing through the farm's rehabilitation program, which had expanded to include counseling services and job placement assistance. The success rates were so impressive that the VA had made it a model for similar programs. Nationwide, Trump's involvement hadn't ended with saving the farm. He had maintained a personal interest in Anderson Valley's success, often calling Tom to discuss agricultural policy or stopping by during campaign tours. The farm had become a symbol of his commitment to rural America, and he frequently cited it as an example of how traditional values could thrive in the modern era. What happened at Anderson Valley Farm, Trump would say in his speeches, shows what's possible when we stand up for American farmers. We didn't just save a farm, we saved a way of life. His continued support had helped ensure that the legislation protecting family farms remained strong and effectively enforced. The farm's influence on agricultural policy continued to grow. The Anderson Valley model had become shorthand for an approach to farming that balanced tradition with innovation, profit with community service, and growth with sustainability. Government agencies and agricultural organizations studied the farm's methods, incorporating its principles into their own programs and policies. Tom's role had evolved as well. While he still rose before dawn to handle his farming duties, he had become an influential voice in agricultural policy discussions. His practical experience and deep understanding of farming traditions gave weight to his perspectives on everything, from soil conservation to rural economic development. Farming isn't just about growing crops, he would explain to visitors. It's about growing community, growing knowledge, and growing the next generation of farmers. This philosophy had become the cornerstone of the Institute's programs, influencing how farming was taught and practiced across the country. The farm's seed preservation program had expanded into a national network, connecting traditional farmers and seed savers across America. The collection now included thousands of heirloom varieties, each with its own story and cultural significance. The program had become crucial in maintaining agricultural biodiversity and preserving traditional farming knowledge. Local impact remained at the heart of Anderson Valley's mission. The farm store had evolved into a community hub, offering not just fresh produce but classes, events, and gathering spaces. Local families still found affordable, healthy food there, while tourists could experience authentic farm-to-table dining and educational programs. The success had sparked a revival in Pine Creek and surrounding communities. Young people who had left for cities were returning, drawn by opportunities in sustainable agriculture and related businesses. New farms had started, following the Anderson Valley model, creating a network of family-run agricultural operations that supported each other while maintaining their independence. Research partnerships with universities had yielded impressive results. Studies conducted at Anderson Valley Farm had demonstrated the environmental and economic benefits of traditional farming methods. The findings helped support policy changes protecting family farms and promoting sustainable agriculture. The farm's dairy cooperative had grown to include dozens of small producers, all following Tom's methods and standards. The success proved that traditional dairy farming could compete with industrial operations while maintaining higher environmental and ethical standards. The Anderson Valley brand had become nationally recognized for its quality and sustainability. Technology played a surprising role in the farm's evolution. Michael's management systems had been adopted by farms across the country, helping them balance traditional methods with modern efficiency. The platforms helped small farms compete with larger operations while maintaining their traditional character. Educational programs had expanded beyond agriculture. The farm hosted classes in everything from traditional crafts to rural entrepreneurship. Emily's curriculum had been adopted by schools nationwide, helping students understand the connections between farming, community, and environmental stewardship. Global Finance's Heritage Farm Protection Program had evolved into a comprehensive approach to agricultural lending, widely copied by other banks. The program considered not just financial metrics, but historical significance, community impact, and environmental stewardship when making lending decisions. International recognition brought delegations from around the world to study the Anderson Valley model. The farm's success in preserving traditional agriculture while adapting to modern challenges offered lessons for farming communities globally. Tom often hosted farmers from other countries, sharing knowledge and building connections across cultures. Today, When visitors drive past Anderson Valley Farm, they see something remarkable, a perfect blend of America's agricultural heritage and its promising future. The for sale sign that once marked the farm's darkest hour now holds a place of honor in the Institute's museum, displayed alongside a now iconic photograph of Donald Trump and Tom walking through the golden wheat fields during that fateful visit. The story of Anderson Valley Farm became more than just a tale of survival. It evolved into a blueprint for preserving America's agricultural heritage. Local school children who visit the farm often gather around the museum display, listening intently as Tom recounts the day when a single phone call changed not just his fate, but the future of family farming across America. "You see that sign?" Tom would say, pointing to the weathered "for sale" sign. "It reminds us that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures. But more importantly, it teaches us that when Americans stand together, there's nothing we can't accomplish." His voice still carries the same passion that caught Trump's attention years ago. The farm's impact on national agricultural policy continues to grow. What started as Trump's intervention to save one family farm has evolved into a comprehensive framework for protecting America's agricultural heritage. Banks across the country now follow what they call the Anderson Valley Protocol when dealing with family farms, considering not just financial metrics, but generational and community value. Tom still maintains his dawn-to-dusk schedule, though. These days, he's usually accompanied by eager apprentices from around the country. Young farmers-to-be travel from every state to learn not just about agriculture, but about the values that made Anderson Valley Farm a national symbol of resilience and tradition. The farm's educational programs have expanded beyond anything Tom could have imagined. The old barn, once nearly empty when Tom thought he would have to sell, now houses a state-of-the-art agricultural education center. Here, traditional farming wisdom meets modern sustainable practices, creating a unique learning environment that attracts students from around the world. Trump's continued support played a crucial role in the farm's evolution. His regular visits and social media updates about Anderson Valley Farm kept the spotlight on the importance of preserving family farms. "What we did here," Trump often says, during his visits wasn't just about saving a farm. It was about saving the American way of life. The impact on Pine Creek has been transformative. The town, once facing the prospect of losing its agricultural heritage, has become a model for rural revival. New businesses have sprung up, young families have moved in, and the community has found a renewed sense of purpose centered around its agricultural traditions. Tom's children have taken on expanded roles in the operation. Emily's educational programs have been adopted by schools nationwide, while Michael's technology solutions help other family farms modernize while maintaining their traditional character. Together, they're ensuring that Anderson Valley Farm continues to evolve while staying true to its roots. The farm store has become a community hub, offering not just fresh produce, but a gathering place for locals and visitors alike. The shelves still stock affordable basics for local families alongside artisanal products that attract tourists. The bulletin board that once displayed community thank you notes now showcases news articles about the farm's national impact. Perhaps most importantly, Anderson Valley Farm has shown that some traditions are worth fighting for. In an era of rapid change and corporate consolidation, the farm stands as proof that with determination, support, and the right policies, America's agricultural heritage can be preserved for future generations. "You know what means the most to me?" Tom often reflects, standing in the spot where he once hammered in that "for sale" sign. "It's not just that we saved the farm, it's that we helped save a way of life, and not just for our family, but for families all across America." The story of Anderson Valley Farm continues to inspire. Tour buses regularly pull up to the farm, bringing visitors eager to see the place where a revolution in American agricultural policy began. But for Tom, the most important visitors are still the local families who stop by for fresh vegetables, the children who come to learn about farming, and the young farmers who seek to carry on the traditions he fought so hard to preserve. As the sun sets over Anderson Valley Farm each evening, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, it's clear that this place represents something larger than itself. It's a testament to the enduring value of American farming traditions, a symbol of what can be achieved when people come together to protect what matters most, and a beacon of hope for rural communities across the nation. The influence of Anderson Valley Farm had spread far beyond American borders. Agricultural delegations from around the world began making pilgrimages to this small corner of Montana, eager to understand how a family farm's fight for survival had sparked a movement that was reshaping modern agriculture. Japanese farmers, known for their own deep agricultural traditions, were among the first international visitors. They were particularly interested in how Anderson Valley Farm had managed to preserve traditional methods while adapting to modern challenges. A group of rice farmers from Hokkaido spent a month studying Tom's approach to sustainable agriculture, drawing parallels between his methods and their own centuries-old farming practices. European agricultural ministers made official visits, studying how the Anderson Valley model could be adapted for their own country's struggling family farms. The French Ministry of Agriculture sent a special delegation, recognizing similarities between their own protected agricultural heritage sites and what the Anderson Valley legislation had achieved in America. Trump's influence helped facilitate these international connections. His advocacy for the farm had caught the attention of world leaders, many of whom faced similar challenges in their own countries. During international trade discussions, the success of Anderson Valley Farm often came up as an example of how traditional agriculture could be preserved without sacrificing economic viability. The farm began hosting international exchange programs, bringing farmers from different cultures together to share knowledge and traditions. A group of Italian olive growers shared their generational wisdom about sustainable farming, while African farmers brought insights about drought-resistant crops. These exchanges created a global network of family farms, all working to preserve their agricultural heritage. Major international organizations took notice. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, sent researchers to study how the Anderson Valley approach could be applied in developing countries. The World Bank began incorporating elements of the Anderson Valley Protocol into their agricultural lending guidelines, recognizing the importance of preserving traditional farming methods. The farm's seed preservation program gained international significance. Seeds from Anderson Valley's collection was shared with farmers in countries where traditional varieties had been lost to industrial agriculture. These exchanges helped preserve agricultural biodiversity while creating lasting connections between farming communities worldwide. International media coverage brought new perspectives to the story. BBC documentaries, German television features, and Japanese news programs all highlighted different aspects of the farm's success. Each telling added new layers to the narrative, helping people understand the universal importance of preserving agricultural heritage. The farm's impact on international agricultural policy was significant. Countries from Brazil to India began adopting similar protections for their family farms, often consulting with Tom and his team as they developed their programs. The Anderson Valley model became a template for agricultural preservation worldwide. Academic institutions from around the world established research partnerships with the farm. Universities in Australia, Canada, and the Netherlands sent graduate students to study everything from soil management techniques to community engagement strategies. These collaborations led to new insights into sustainable agriculture and rural development. Tom found himself traveling internationally, speaking at agricultural conferences and consulting with foreign governments. Though he remained humble, his practical wisdom resonated with farmers and policymakers worldwide. His message about the importance of preserving agricultural heritage transcended cultural and language barriers. The Veterans Rehabilitation Program attracted international attention as well. Military officials from NATO countries visited to study how agricultural work could help veterans heal from trauma. The program's success led to similar initiatives being established on farms across Europe and Asia. International investment in rural America increased as a result of the farm's success. Foreign agricultural companies, inspired by the Anderson Valley story, began partnering with family farms rather than trying to replace them. This new approach helped preserve local farming traditions while providing needed capital for modernization. The farm's influence on international banking practices was particularly noteworthy. Banks in Europe and Asia began developing their own versions of the Heritage Farm Protection Program, adapting global finance's model to their local contexts. This shift in agricultural lending practices helped protect family farms worldwide. The future of Anderson Valley Farm began taking a new shape as Tom's grandchildren grew old enough to participate in the family legacy. Sarah, Emily's 14-year-old daughter, showed the same natural affinity for farming that her grandfather had at her age. Michael's twins, Thomas and Robert, spent every summer vacation learning the intricacies of running a modern family farm while honoring its traditions. "It's different from when I was learning," Tom would say, watching Sarah confidently operate the farm's new hybrid tractor, a machine that combined traditional farming principles with electric power. But the important things, the real heart of farming, that hasn't changed at all. Sarah had inherited her grandfather's intuitive understanding of the land, along with her mother's passion for education. The next generation brought fresh perspectives to the operation. Sarah started a YouTube channel documenting life on the farm, reaching hundreds of thousands of young people interested in agricultural heritage. Her videos, showing everything from traditional milking techniques to modern sustainable farming practices, helped bridge the gap between agricultural tradition and contemporary media. Thomas and Robert, despite being twins, approached farming from different angles. Thomas inherited his father Michael's technological aptitude, developing new apps and systems to help small farms operate more efficiently. Robert, meanwhile, focused on traditional crafts and skills, becoming an expert in heritage farming techniques. Together, they represented the perfect balance of innovation and tradition that had become Anderson Valley Farm's hallmark. Trump, during his regular visits to the farm, took particular interest in the younger generation's involvement. "This is what we fought for," he would say, watching the grandchildren at work, "not just to save a farm, but to ensure these traditions and values could be passed down to the next generation of American farmers." The involvement of Tom's grandchildren led to new educational initiatives at the farm. The Young Farmers Academy was established, offering programs specifically designed for children and teenagers interested in agriculture. The academy combined hands-on farming experience with modern educational techniques, creating a unique learning environment that attracted young people from across the country. Sarah's influence was particularly felt in the farm's approach to environmental education. She helped develop programs that taught young visitors about the connection between traditional farming methods and modern environmental conservation. Her passion for combining agricultural heritage with environmental stewardship inspired a new generation of environmentally conscious farmers. The twins brought their own innovations. Thomas's technology solutions made the farm more efficient while respecting traditional methods. His farm management apps, designed specifically for family farms, helped bridge the gap between old and new ways of farming. Robert's focus on traditional skills ensured that essential farming knowledge wouldn't be lost to modernization. The farm's apprenticeship program evolved to incorporate the perspectives of both generations. Young apprentices learned traditional techniques from Tom while gaining insights into modern sustainable practices from his grandchildren. This blend of old and new created a unique learning experience that couldn't be found anywhere else. International exchange programs took on new life under the next generation's influence. Sarah's social media presence attracted young farmers from around the world, eager to learn how traditional farming could remain relevant in the modern era. The farm became a global classroom where young people from different cultures could share their agricultural heritage. The grandchildren's involvement also led to new partnerships with schools and universities. Sarah worked with local educators to develop agriculture-focused curriculum materials, while the twins collaborated with agricultural colleges on research projects. These partnerships helped ensure that traditional farming knowledge would be preserved and passed on through formal education channels. Community engagement took on new forms as well. The grandchildren organized events that brought together traditional farming demonstrations with modern sustainability practices. These events attracted diverse audiences, from longtime farmers to urban families interested in connecting with their food sources. Tom watched all this with pride and amazement. The farm he had fought so hard to save was evolving in ways he never could have imagined, while staying true to its core values. His grandchildren were proving that traditional farming could adapt to changing times without losing its essential character. The impact on other family farms was significant. Many began involving their own next generation in similar ways, creating a network of young farmers committed to preserving agricultural heritage while embracing innovation. The Anderson Valley model was proving sustainable not just environmentally and economically, but generationally as well. The story of Anderson Valley Farm has become more than just a tale of survival. It has evolved into a blueprint for the future of American agriculture. What began with a desperate farmer putting up a for sale sign, followed by an unexpected call from Donald Trump, has transformed into a movement that has redefined what's possible for family farms across America. Today, as Tom Anderson walks his fields with his grandchildren, the changes are visible everywhere. The old barn, once nearly empty when he thought he would have to sell, now houses a state-of-the-art agricultural education center. The fields that his grandfather first plowed are now a perfect blend of traditional wisdom and modern innovation. But most importantly, the spirit of family farming that he fought so hard to preserve is stronger than ever. You know, Tom often tells visitors, "When I put up that for sale sign, I thought it was the end of everything my family had built. But sometimes what looks like an ending turns out to be a new beginning." He usually pauses here, watching his grandchildren work with the farm's apprentices, and sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. The impact of Trump's intervention extended far beyond saving one farm. The legislation born from the Anderson Valley crisis continues to protect family farms across America. Banks now consider not just financial metrics, but generational and community value when making agricultural loans. The Anderson Valley Protocol has become standard practice in agricultural lending nationwide. But perhaps the most significant change has been in how Americans view family farms. They're no longer seen as relics of the past, but as essential parts of the nation's future. The Anderson Valley story showed that traditional farming could adapt to modern challenges while maintaining its core values. The farm's influence continues to grow. Agricultural programs worldwide study the Anderson Valley model, International delegations regularly visit to learn how traditional farming methods can be preserved in the modern era. Tom's grandchildren host popular social media channels that teach farming principles to a new generation. Trump remains a regular visitor, often bringing guests to show them what he calls real American farming. His continued support has helped ensure that the protections for family farms remain strong. "What happened here," he often says, "shows what's possible when we fight for what matters." The farm store has become a community hub, offering not just fresh produce, but a gathering place where people can connect with their agricultural heritage. Local families still find affordable, healthy food there, while tourists come to experience authentic farm life and learn about sustainable agriculture. Tom's children and grandchildren have fully embraced their roles in continuing the legacy. Emily's educational programs have become a model for agricultural education nationwide. Michael's technology solutions help family farms across America maintain their traditional character while competing in the modern marketplace. The next generation is ensuring that Anderson Valley Farm remains both a working farm and a beacon of hope for rural America. The story of Anderson Valley Farm reminds us that some things are worth fighting for. In an era of rapid change and corporate consolidation, this small farm in Montana proved that with determination, support, and the right policies, America's agricultural heritage can be preserved for future generations. As the sun sets over Anderson Valley Farm each evening, casting long shadows across fields that have fed the community for generations, it's clear that this place represents something larger than itself. It's a testament to the enduring value of American farming traditions, a symbol of what can be achieved when people come together to protect what matters most, and proof that the American dream is still very much alive. Looking back, Tom reflects, "Standing in the spot where he once hammered in that for sale sign, I realize we didn't just save a farm, we helped save a way of life, and not just for our family, but for families all across America. That's something worth more than all the money in the world." In the end, the story of Anderson Valley Farm isn't just about preserving the past, it's about securing the future of American agriculture. It's a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things are worth fighting for, and that with the right leadership and community support, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome.